We're going to now move into the panel presentation portion of the meeting. And I'm going to introduce Adam Zuckerman, who will be the moderator for our panel on entrepreneurship and some of the challenges and opportunities that exist in Fairfax County. And then Adam can introduce the panel members. So, Adam Zuckerman, who's just joined us in the front, is an entrepreneur, attorney, and MBA. Adam focuses on innovation initiatives at the world's #1 pay TV provider, Discovery Communications. He's also the founder of Fosterly, an organization which connects innovators and entrepreneurs as they start and scale their endeavors. In January 2015, Fosterly held the Collaborate Conference, the region's largest innovation and entrepreneurship event of the year. More than 1,000 attendees included leading innovators from both the private and public sectors. Adam, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you all our panel members, and Adam for being here this morning to share your insights. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having us. This should be a very communal and friendly conversation among some of the regions and the area's great entrepreneurs. Given that we don't have too much time, we will hop in. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A. As you mentioned, I'm Adam Zuckerman. The reason why I'm here is primarily for Fosterly. We're actually partnering with the county and several other jurisdictions to complete the region's first regional startup census right now. We had over 215 companies, and that's a Herculean task to have their founders respond for more than 30 minutes to give us information. And what we found is that the region is actually very strong in the startup sense, with some very interesting facts as well. The survey is going to be released in mid-January, or the census rather, but we found a few things that are peculiar. For example, the average age of founders of startups in Fairfax is 46. That in the region, startups are going to account for thousands of jobs in the next year alone. But with that, we can talk more about the census later. Let's go down and get some on-the-ground perspective. So Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to?
All right, is this?
Press the button on the bottom right.
Okay, can you hear me? My name is Derek Doan. I'm originally a West Coast person, although I spent about 10 or 11 years out on the East Coast, DC area, as well as far north as New York, as far south as North Carolina, for school. I've recently moved back out here and have one venture going which pertains to document management, particularly for legal and corporate environments, specifically centering on electronic discovery, software development related to that, and consulting like. And we're also getting ready to launch another venture in the beginning of the new year, having to do with essentially repurposing Slack office space. So I'm also an attorney. Spent a lot of time in school, was curious, but I've spent probably the past decade and a half as an entrepreneur.
All right, moving down the list, let's go to Brian. Let's talk a little bit about your background and what gives you credentials to be here.
Hello, I'm Brian Park. I am the director of Startup Grind DC. Startup Grind is actually a worldwide entrepreneur community, we claim to be the biggest independent entrepreneur community in the world. We have over chapters. We have 200 chapters, about 250,000 startups in our network, and we're actually based in Silicon Valley. I am a 3-time entrepreneur. 2 of them actually were based here in DC, or actually in the DMV area, and one was actually a service-able veteran-owned business, being government contracting here in this area, and also currently I'm a director of product at this startup in the Fishbowl, which before that I was actually managing the Fishbowl, and that's how I got involved with the startup.
For those that don't know, why don't you explain what the Fishbowl is?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the AOL Fishbowl is actually an incubator here in Loudoun County, not Fairfax, Loudoun County. And, we've had close to 22 startups in the past 4 years, and we raised close to $50 million in follow-up funding for these companies. And so we're actually one of the most successful incubators in this area. And so that's where I'm at now.
Okay, so moving away from tech specific, let's move over to Marcy, who's the founder and CEO of MetaWare. She's actually down from New York, but has very close ties to the region now. So Marcy, tell us about yourself.
Great. So I am a 25-plus year ecopreneur. I've embedded people, planet, profit, passion, and purpose into all of my businesses. And my first business in 1990, called the Institute for Integrated Nutrition in New York City, is now the world's largest nutrition school and has certified over 75,000 people as health coaches. And then in 1995, I coined the term eco-fashion and built a lifestyle brand that now sells major retailers like Macy's and Target. So my vision in 2013 was, how do I bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and embed sustainability into a factory that would be very disruptive and would add value and drive source to story. So I found a very cool dyer here in Fairfax, and in 2013 we joined forces. And my goal is to, in the next 3 to 5 years, tenfold his current business through leveraging all of the relationships that I have cultivated over the last 2 decades.
And Min, recently published by the FCC for a paper, which is pretty impressive. Why don't you talk about your background?
I'm Min Tran. I am the founder of Safety Now Solutions, which is based here in Fairfax County. Our firm is a software development firm, and we focus on 911 software, school shooting software, police software, and actually a public works software. This public works software, surprisingly, is used in all major cities: San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, and actually in Alexandria, Arlington, Loudoun County, but not Fairfax County.
Yet.
Come on, Ken.
And last but not least, we have Kathy Muse to help represent some of the government side of things. It's important for the government, as you all know, to work very closely with startups. So Kathy, why don't you talk a little bit about what you're up to with the Department of Procurement and Materials Management?
Thank you. I'd like to say I invented government procurement, but I did not. I am the director and the purchasing agent for the County of Fairfax. We work with the business community here in Fairfax to partner them with other businesses, as well as to partner with the county in growing their business.
All right. So, Marcy, let's go back to you. You live up in New York City. You're a serial entrepreneur, but yet you find yourself now owning, running, and quite frankly operating a materials manufacturing facility in Fairfax. Why here?
I think being so close to Washington, D.C. gives us an incredible opportunity to be a role model of innovation and to show how we can bring manufacturing back to the U.S. So we've already in startup mode, and we're a 40,000 square foot factory off of Germantown Road. We've already attracted people from the U.S. government, out of D.C., NGOs. Major companies have come down, like Target and Macy's. And so I think, if the goal is to be disruptive and we can, attract people to create digital content, marketing teams to come down, the accessibility to Washington, D.C. and the major airports here, Dulles and Reagan, makes it very easy to do the source to story and to meet, the vision of the company.
Did you consider other locations?
It really started with, I was in a dire search for something innovative to build on top of. And so in meeting Cass Shiver, who born and raised, lived his whole life in Fairfax, just everything added up to the perfect place at partnership. And but I think we have a huge opportunity.
Okay. So oftentimes there's the story of entrepreneurs that start companies, and there's a recent report out that says that to have startups founded, the individuals who start those companies tend to be in those locations for 2 years or more, or have a tie that goes back to that area. Derek, you were in California for quite some time, and you recently came back to start another venture. What made you return and not stay out in California?
Good question. Well, so I was in California as well as Seattle. In fact, I lived for a number of years in Seattle, and that's after law school. That's where I actually launched my first startup, which was also in the space of document management, particularly for legal teams. In some ways, I think that the sort of the DMV region, it has some geographic benefits in that it's a very small region in some respects, but it's compressed, and so there's a great population to serve. Whereas in certain parts of California, while there is a different culture out there that does in certain respects favor incubation of startups and even tracking through certain early stage avenues a little better. I've also found that regionally out there, it's a little more distributed and tougher in some ways to, in a sense, to serve a more concentrated market. So that was one. There were many other reasons, but that was one factor that I think played into this. I had lived here a number of years back, and that was probably the driving force.
Did you look at other jurisdictions in the region, or did you focus primarily on Fairfax when you were choosing to come back?
Really, my focus has been the whole region. I'll say particularly the DC and Virginia regions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So moving over to Brian, you're the director of Startup Grind, which is one of the more popular event series in the region. You've brought in speakers from all over the country, including spotlighting features from the region. And from that, you have a very granular region-first mentality when you have these events. What have you seen? Is Fairfax competing well? Is there enough collaboration? Do the entrepreneurs that you interact with, what are they looking for?
So, actually, just wanted to take two steps back about this area. Actually, I was the former COO of Startup Grind, which is the entire organization, and so I spoke to a lot of chapter directors in their regions, and I've seen some very stark similarities. Some similarities and stark differences. And I had one of my past guests. He had kind of summed it up very succinctly, and he was like, "Hey, in this area, DMV area, I've noticed that the entrepreneurs here sort of act differently than some of the other entrepreneurs in, say, Silicon Valley and New York." And so, this is what I've sort of noticed is, but entrepreneurs tend to be very non-collaborative here.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is that VCs collaborate here, which is exactly the opposite of Silicon Valley. Like, no VCs want to collaborate because they're sort of very mob mentality, right? They want to own their own territory, they want to own their own deals. They don't like to collaborate. And entrepreneurs, they're very collaborative there. And so, in this area, again, I feel that entrepreneurs, and maybe it's coming from the government contracting world and government where it's sort of shrouded in secrecy. Maybe it's that culture, I don't know. But I feel like this area, some improvements that needs to happen in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they need to figure out how to retain some of the, I would say, mid-tier entrepreneurs. And so here's some anecdotal evidence. You guys heard of Apple, Microsoft.
Small companies.
Yeah, small companies. So these companies have bought startups in this area. So Smart Things was bought by Samsung for $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Hawkinson. Add This was bought by Oracle for $200 million. Human Radford. The list goes on and on. Parature by Microsoft for $100 million. These are very, pretty sizable deals. But these founders, they all left. They left the area. And so, and these were all past Startup Grind guests, by the way. And I called them up and I was like, "Why did you guys leave?" And I felt like this area is very, it's sort of like the coal miners mentality.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you get out of the area and you get, you make it, you leave. And so I feel that especially in this area, we need to figure out how to retain those entrepreneurs that can serve as super angels and angel investors for new startups that do generate in this area.
That's a good point, and it goes back to a recent conversation I believe was brought up in this room or in front of those in the room about the virtuous cycle, which is a complex series of events that lead to something that benefits on the whole. The opposite of that is the vicious cycle. I would say that people leaving would be a vicious cycle, that we nurture talent here and then they leave. A virtuous cycle would be after those individuals have exits, they reinvest back into the local economy, and we get that super angel class. Moving forward, thinking that every single thing that we want to do here hopefully can impart some knowledge where there's actual action events that can be taken. Let's shift over to Min. Now, let's give 2 examples of things that you think could be done better and the challenges of why those actions should be taken.
It's a great question. Thank you for asking that. First, our company has been trying to sell to the government, been learning to sell to the government for about 6 years now. And as a startup, we've learned 4 things, but you're only asking for 2. So I'll just give you 2. First is that the RFP process is flawed. There are contracts that are set aside for small businesses, but the problem is that the definition of what a small business is incorrect. For those who don't know, if you're a small business, you can apply for something called SWAM, which is a certificate for small women-owned and minority-owned businesses. So there's these contracts out there that support SWAM certified businesses. Interestingly enough, in 2014, Loudoun County awarded a $40,000 contract to this company called SHI International. This contract's still being used today, so it's worth about $120,000. The problem is SHI International is certified as a small business. Their net sales is $6.8 billion. How can any startup compete against a billion-dollar company? It's a flawed definition. Last year, the Department of Justice had a contract out for school shooting software. It's worth about $600,000. Basically, it was supposed to be $150,000 per year. But on this set-aside for small business contract, RFP, there was this tiny, tiny clause. It said that if the small business was to ask for more than $100,000 a year, then this contract was not relevant to the small business. So basically what it was saying is that the contract's worth $150,000, but if you are a woman-owned or minority-owned business, the government would only pay you $100,000. That sounds like discrimination to me. So obviously there's something flawed with the RFP process. And the company that actually won this contract didn't bid for $600,000. They won it for $1 million. And they were not even certified as a small business. And this is all in Virginia.
Okay, so those are 2.
That's actually just RFP.
It's a subpart. It's a subpart. We can get back to more with the question time. Let's shift over to Kathy. Obviously, that's a difficult thing that might be for you to take in. But what are some of the things that you've seen interacting with startups? What can your office do to respond to questions like that? And what are some of the positive things that you're working on to make it easier for startups to operate successfully in Fairfax?
That's also a very good question. The definitions for small businesses are generated by the state, so we can work with the state to look at additional classifications for small women-owned and minority businesses. As a matter of fact, the state has created a micro business definition, which are for very small businesses. Again, probably bigger than most startups, but still considered small businesses in the state. We also work with the business community to try to simplify our procurement process for specific areas in procurement. I'll give you an example. We went out for a contract for innovative solutions. We were looking for solutions to problems we might not even know we have. So we went out to the business community and said, please tell us if you have a product or program or solution that would help to improve government outcomes, efficiencies, and operations. And this really confused the business community. They came back to us and said, well, what do you want? I said, we don't know. You tell us what you have. Maybe we want what you have. We aren't sure what we want. And we received nearly 30 proposals, most of which were not at all innovative. And we received a few innovative proposals, and we evaluated them. And we made some awards, and we've launched all 3 of the contracts, and we're waiting to see what the adoption is like for these 3 contracts and how these products and solutions will be used. But we then did sort of a hot wash to find out, well, what was good about the procurement process and what was bad. And what was bad was the procurement process itself, the RFP process that Min referred to, was not very innovative. And so we wanted to look at we're looking at ways to change that procurement process to make it more innovative, more open to the startup community, to the entrepreneurial community, so that they'll feel welcomed in the RFP process.
So drawing parallel, it's not just that the RFP process in Fairfax may be onerous or complicated for startups. It's other jurisdictions, including federal as well. Taking a parallel example, the Presidential Innovation Fellowship Program that's on the federal level a few years ago demoed and tested a project called Easy RFP. So there are several things to look at across the country that could potentially open up the door for smaller companies to do business. Let's go back to Marcy, and then we'll go down the line, 30 seconds each. So this is rapid fire. What's one thing that you think Fairfax could do better to make your life as an entrepreneur better?
So with our vision to add over 200 jobs in the next handful of years, I mean, we'd love to work together for workforce development and training to help underserved communities, since our platform is built on not just environmental sustainability, but also on social responsibility. So we already have a jail release program in our factory, and we've actually employed a few homeless people from Fairfax, and we want to look to do more of that kind of work. So I think for us, it would be that kind of partnership to help us grow and fill the factory.
Let's see, that's hard to contain in the 30 seconds. My sense is, if I could be somewhat aggressive, I would say that I see to oversimplify, I see 2 questions being conflated into one, and I think they're more properly separated. One is, it seems to be how to get work, whether it's a small, medium, or billion-dollar company. How do they get through the pre-established processes to secure a contract? That to me is a different question than how to attract startups and how to cultivate an environment where they'll flourish. I think there are 2 different questions, and I think they end up calling on 2 different kinds of analyses. I'm going to leave aside the RFP side. From the startup perspective, I think I've done a lot of work with either as mentoring startups or working with some incubators, including Techstars and some others. My experience is that where they excel on behalf of startups is they don't try to be the startup themselves. And they also don't make the mistake of, and no offense to the procurement process you were just describing, but you said there was a flat side on the wheel. I've found that folks sometimes trying to engineer that kind of environment accidentally end up operating according to, I'll kind of colloquially say the saying, I need to go find my people in order to determine where to lead them. I don't think that's, I think you need to create an environment. If you want startups genuinely to come into an area and do their thing, you need to identify what your role is going to be and what it's not going to be. And it's not going to be the startup. It's going to be participating in laying a foundation that becomes part of their execution model. You don't become their execution model, but they have things that they bring to the table that you don't, and you also have things that they need that they don't necessarily bring to the table. So in my experience, I guess creating, and this I found certainly in California and even in Seattle, especially under the areas of, it was mentioned in the first presentation for Amazon and Microsoft in downtown Seattle. Paul Allen has basically taken over an entire district that 15 years ago was completely underused, and now it has become the new downtown, mecca for technology. What did he do? He did a number of things. I'll focus on one, and then I'll turn it over.
One quick one, 30 seconds for the whole
Sorry.
answer.
I'll just say, I think he created an environment that allowed for what I will call the outspoken servant. It brought in people who have all kinds of ideas, but it gave room without strictures and protocol. And I think that has allowed for a lot of fermentation of ideas to really flourish. I think the same is true in spades, certainly all across the Silicon Valley Peninsula. I think that's what Fairfax would do well to really focus on engineering very, very precisely.
Brian?
Oops, sorry.
Okay, 30 seconds, right?
Sorry.
Stopwatch.
Okay, got it. I would say, my one thing is try to make not just only Fairfax County, but DMV area into a startup destination. And what I mean by that is people from everywhere, from all over the world, will pick up their bags to come here, because that's what they're doing to New York and Silicon Valley. And one of the things that I've been a very big proponent about is, can we bring in a national brand of an accelerator? So, for example, could we bring a 500 startup? That's a very premier incubator, or Techstars. And the reason why I specifically mentioned Techstars is because they have these programs where they'll partner up with your flagship company. So could it be that we can have a Lockheed Martin powered by Techstars, right? That's a cybersecurity accelerator. Or could we have a Techstars, collaborate and team up with Blackboard, which has an ed tech. You can take these tenant industries in this area and then bring a national brand like that. Then you're going to have people from all over the world pick up their bags to come here. And the second thing is we, shameless plug here, it's actually going to be at Refraction. We have a Startup Grind holiday party, James's place. So you guys are more than welcome to meet some of the startups. It's this Thursday, 6 to 9, Reston Town Center. Thank you.
All right.
Well, I can only speak on behalf of or from a tech perspective. I think the government needs to recognize that the tech game is a game of talent. It's not a game of size or company size. And to weave a story, basically, a short one. Let's say we're playing a basketball game, and on the one team, we have 5 people that represents the large company. And let's say it's 5 billionaires on this team. So Mark Cuban, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Pretty powerful team. On the other team, you have a scrappy team of 3 people, 5 against 3. But that team of 3 happens to be Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, and LeBron James. Who do you think is going to win? It's not the team with money or more people. This is a game of talent. Thanks.
So we only have 8 more minutes, so one quick last question, and then we'll open it up to questions. I believe we might be able to go a little bit longer for Q&A, given that the next meeting starts at 10 in here, but we want to wrap it up. The final point that I'll make before we go down the line for one quick more question is try and think of things in the construct of innovation. And innovation is a made-up word in many ways. It's almost as if you asked your child when they come home from school, "How was your day?" And they go, "It's interesting." You learned nothing from their response. So instead, look at innovation and consider it as progress. And there's 2 types of progress. There is incremental progress and disruptive progress. And they're not mutually exclusive from each other. You can go after both. There is something called the Mass Index, which is conducted up in Massachusetts, which is very similar to the report that Donna gave earlier, that examines their innovation ecosystem. And they're defining innovation as the capacity to continually translate ideas into novel products, processes, and services that create, improve, or expand business opportunities. And that's really the ecosystem that entrepreneurs oftentimes find themselves in. So when you think of things that you can do to spur innovation, break it down a little bit easier. It'll be more simple on each of you, and just think of what type of progress are you trying to push forward, disruptive or incremental. And with that, let's start with Kathy. We'll go down the line. This is a very, very short answer. What's the one question you wish that I asked, and a shorter response to that question?
Gosh, that's a hard question.
So we ask it.
That's right. Well, I wish you had asked what one thing the government could do to foster startups, since you skipped me in that. And I would say one of the things that we need to do is to look at ways to recognize and discern in our processes for contracting that talent that Min was talking about. It's very difficult in evaluating a proposal on paper and a 2-hour interview to determine that you have Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and the other person who I can't remember. What you have is a company coming in and talking to you about their success and their talent, but each one of them presents themselves as the most talented. So I think we need to work with folks like Min to determine good ways to ferret out those key elements in a company in order to know that they would be a good business partner.
So as someone mentioned earlier, there's very little manufacturing in Fairfax. So, you know, I would believe when you look at what the true costs of the fashion industry are, and most people don't realize it's the most polluting industry in the world, second to coal, and that 20% of the world's freshwater pollution actually comes from textile treatment and dyeing. So the idea is a lot of the big retailers and brands today are looking for sustainable solutions. They're all jumping on this train. If you look at the food industry with farm to table, organic food, it's about transparency today. So going back to, you know, how can we, you know, bring manufacturing, maybe make Fairfax even a hub, is because the source to story, again, is so powerful today, is being able to have that transparency. And so Target as an example, you know, many of these companies, they want fast fashion without the fast fashion that's destroying the world. They want fast fashion that is in the US, that gives them flexibility, that helps them reduce risk from producing overseas. And so we're at the beginning of a movement here. So.
Let's see, I would say one thing that comes to mind that I think would be a useful question, I don't want to say you forgot, I just would add to the mix of questions that I think would be important for this body as well as any startup to raise, to ask and answer. And I would say the question is, what are the top line characteristics that are most likely to make it happen? Make it happen. What does make it happen mean? For this body, make it happen may mean something different than an individual startup, but everybody's concerned with something happening that's not today. And I would say there are two characteristics that I'll isolate for our short response. One is action or execution, and the second is measurement. What I mean by action or execution, I think, is fairly self-evident. We all have ideas. Many people have ideas. I've talked to an enormous number of people with extraordinary ideas, but that's a much larger population than the population who actually executes the idea, brings it into being, whether all the way or even fractionally. It's not more of something, it's a difference in kind. So moving, whatever it takes, setting up the environment that facilitates moving an idea into play, into action, is a very big transom to cross. And the second I will say about measurement. I have, especially some of the smallest groups, as well as large groups, when you challenge them on, are you getting to where your idea points toward in your execution model, frequently find them, I've found, and I've found myself do it too, I think it's a human response, they will measure themselves based on where they've come from. And I think that's the wrong measurement stick. I think that's going to lead you down a trap. And the trap is going to undercut your execution. I think your measurement is against what you set out to do and who you intend to serve while doing it. That's really what matters. I don't mean to be blunt, but I don't think it matters as much looking at where you yourself have come from. To me, that is more the model of being a student in relation to your grades and progress. But I think when you move into the arena of either supporting startups or being a startup, supporting actual clients, I think the yardstick has to change fundamentally, and it has to change to measuring against what you set out to deliver. And that, I think, is sometimes a harder lesson. A lot of people, to not ask and answer that question of themselves, I think prevents you from actually getting out on the playing field.
All right, 2 more minutes left. Brian and Min?
So we got a minute now?
You got a minute.
This is double up from
Yeah,
last
it
time. All right, good,
You
excellent.
sat at the wrong seat.
Really quick, actually, I have a little story. My wife, she bought a bread maker, and it was the first time I was making bread, and I put everything in there except one ingredient. And as it cooked, I took it out, and it was hard as rock. Okay, it was literally hard as rock, and it's because I forgot to put yeast in it. And the thing is that the one question I wish you asked is, what is the most important ingredient that we're missing here in DC?
Hey, Brian, what's the most important ingredient that we're
Glad you asked that question. And it's really interesting because every time I interview some of the best entrepreneurs here in DC, it's always the same question, over and over and over again, this very question. Never see this in New York, I never see this in Silicon Valley. It's characteristically here. They always ask about, what do you think about culture? How do you engender culture in your startup? And I feel that there's a yearning here in DC. Like entrepreneurs, they want to figure out how can we make this DC area, not just Fairfax, but DC area, how can we make this into a more robust, startup community? And it's this whole cultural, this cultural ingredient, and it feels like that as entrepreneurs, like we get it, like we know how to start up a business because we're entrepreneurs. And then if you see a lot of the organizations here in DC, and they're doing entrepreneur communities and activities, they're not really led by entrepreneurs. And so I think Min was going to talk about this, but you should pick up this book, Startup Communities by Brad Feld. And he talks about that there's feeders and leaders. And so the thing is that a very robust community are led by entrepreneurs. Those are the leaders. Feeders are it's kind of like this event, where it's government officials, which is fine, but they're supposed to support the leaders. And so again, this whole cultural mentality of how do you create a startup community, I think that's what happened here in this DC.
All right, and last words of the day, let's make it quick. Min, you're up.
Actually, it's going to be quick because
Okay.
I had wished you asked the same question,
Okay.
and my answer was the same. I even have a sheet here. Brad Feld. It's a book called Startup Communities. So
There we
that's
go.
it. And the answer, I guess, is also yeast. I don't know.
Used. Brad Feld is a community startup evangelist VC and very well-connected person that works out of Denver, Colorado, right outside if people are curious. But with that, thank you very much to the panelists, and thank you very much for hosting us. We hope this was informative. If there's time for Q&A, that's it.
In fact, there is. We have actually probably 15 minutes.
All right.
Sorry about that. We're going to grill you.
No, that's fine. Let's make them sweat.
Who is going? Supervisor Gross.
Thank you. We can talk a lot about philosophy and policies, but as a local elected official, one of the things that we deal with all the time is land use. So my question, actually we have two opportunities, or two questions. E-lofts, we just approved the E-loft rezoning at the board last week in my district, which is going to be a wonderful opportunity for entrepreneurs to live and work in the same location. It's going to be smashing. But that's about land use. And I was intrigued by Ms. Zaroff's manufacturing discussion, where you have 40,000 square feet off of Germantown Road. So you've got a factory. I don't know if that factory existed when you got involved in it or not, but I think one of the things that we hear from folks quite often is the difficulty of our process in Fairfax County just to get the permits so that you can do a factory. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got that 40,000 square feet? Most entrepreneurs are going to have something much smaller and grow into it, but nonetheless, it's a matter of scale. So could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so when I met Cass, he had a much smaller facility, and when we put together our shared vision of 1 + 1 = 11, we decided to create a full turnkey solution, which would add several layers of the supply chain, like cut and sew, to his dye and printing process. He actually bought an old Verizon building that was a 10,000 square foot building. And very creatively, as an entrepreneur, he built all the walls up and added the space to prepare for where we were going together, put solar in. It's a seaweed-based printing process free of all the toxic chemicals like formaldehyde and PVC. So there's my partial story, as well as using organic materials. So basically, coming together, we created this. It has been a challenge on the funding side. It's been a several-year work in progress, and he's hit a lot of walls, and it goes back to access to capital, both for now being able to fill the factory with the right workforce, but also supporting the building and during this runway. I think it's been a little bit of a bumpy ride, but we're ready to roll, and the demand is there.
Oh, if I can,
Yeah.
if I can follow up on that. Did he find that the permitting process through Fairfax County government was helpful, not helpful, improvements needed, et cetera? And maybe we don't have a list right now, but it would be helpful to have that sense of what the barriers might have been. I can't imagine that it was free-flowing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for Cass because he really spearheaded those efforts, and he would be a lot better versed at answering this question. I think it when it slows things down, it's been an arduous and slow process, but and there's still a lot of work to do. But again, just being in startup mode, that created some of the bumps for me to be able to really use factory as a catalyst. So I'm now ready. But yeah, I can't answer the specifics to that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Frank.
John, I have a question for Adam, and that is this repurposing of Slack office.
Oh, Derek?
Derek, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yes.
That's all right.
Talk about that, and do you see an opportunity here in Fairfax County?
Yeah, so first off, I want to say that it's certainly not a new concept. We're not the inventors of it. There are other programs and some innovative and some very brick and mortar based throughout the country. That said, I do think there is an opportunity virtually anywhere in the nation where office space or space. I'll even say I'm not quite clear on what kind of space you were describing, how it originated, but
It's an old office building, vacant office building that's being remade into individual 1,000 square foot apartments that
Yes.
you can use as your residence or as your workplace or both.
yes. So I think that concept is fabulous. I also think it sits on a spectrum of a broader spectrum of options. So wherever you have space that is unused, in my experience, there are multiple dimensions of people out there, whether they're micro, small, medium-sized organizations that would benefit from that. And I think the smaller organizations get, the more those kinds of steps can be obstacles. It's hard to go out and lease space. It's hard to make that forward-thinking, year-long or even 5-year commitment. So how we're approaching this, I'll say just a couple of high-level attributes. One, it's designed really to be more of think of it, the analogy of Airbnb, much more of a booking engine, where you could be a county with, when we say slack space, the term comes from on a hard drive. When you delete something, that space doesn't really go away, it just ceases to be used at that point, and it's considered slack space on the drive. And in some ways, we're building off of that metaphor. But it could be a county, it could be any other municipality, it could also be a single building owner that has had trouble attracting tenants. We work out of Georgetown, and it's an attractive place, but there's a great deal of vacancy. And so it's really designed where, to some degree, self-serve, where you'll be able to come in, list your property. It could be one, it could be hundreds of spaces. It could be shared space environments like this that you want to repurpose for 40 people who can do it on a per day, per week, per month, or basis.
The DC region has the second most square feet of co-working space than any other region in the country, as evidenced by the success of James's initiatives over at Refraction. Right now, there are startups in the country that are leasing out individual conference rooms on the hour. If you want to get involved with Office Slack, which is your company, officeslack.com, you can sign up for the mailing list for it. There's another one that's local out of DuPont Circle called Swing Space, which was born out of a real estate company called McBride Real Estate. And then the larger companies are also trying to get in the space as well. JLL released 2 years ago a platform called High Rise. So the space is very competitive, but it's allowing people to repurpose and utilize spaces that, quite frankly, is dormant.
And just the last sort of nuts and bolts piece I'll add, we're trying to swing the needle away from the traditional lease model, from a legal arrangement perspective, to one of more of a licensing model, where you can bring users in, or they can essentially respond to your invitation to come in under a lease model, and that lease model will be much more expedited. It will be digitally executed online, and it will be according to the terms, except for the core license. You will be able to amend it with or augment it with terms that are specific to your interests and your building, and it really, in a sense, lets you fractionalize unused space in a way that also unburdens some of the larger traditional commitments required of organizations that I think actually form an impediment to the parties getting together. But it's really a marketplace between buyers and sellers. You've got space that's not used, and there are folks out there who need space, and it's giving a mechanism that is hopefully more dynamic and operates at a more rapid velocity to put buyers and sellers together and let you move on down the road.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
Silicon Valley is different, obviously, but in terms of venture capital, have you seen other other regions that were similar to where we're at in terms of not attracting a lot of venture capital that have moved beyond that stage and are now, on the radar of the venture capitalists? And if so, can you suggest what they did to get there? And that's framework.
So I'd like to comment on that. So this goes back to the whole angel investing. So I don't know if you ever heard of Swan and Legend. This is a good example where somebody created a company, NEW, Fred Schauffele is the managing director there, and sold his company for $2.8 billion to Shurion. Then he took that money and created a VC fund. And now he's reinvesting into the area. Now he's partners at the Revolution and also all these other VCs. And so I see that trend happen all the time here in this area. Steve Case is another example. True Ventures, another example of that as well. I feel that we need, again, these super angels or would-be super angels, we have to figure out how to retain them here, keep them here, so they can deploy more, what they call dry powder. Another feeder as well, I think in this area is also when companies go IPO. Then there's a lot of free capital, or again, this dry powder that could be deployed into startups. So, specifically, I with Cvent was a good example of this, where before they went IPO, I knew they were going to go IPO, so I invited Reggie to speak at our startup grind, and this is what I said. I said, please invite all your executives as well, and they showed up too. There was 4 or 5 of them that did show up at that meeting. Startups approached them, and they're like, "Hey, this is what I'm working on. Let's keep tabs. Like, let's keep connections." After they went IPO, those guys subsequently invested in those startups as well. So there's a whole cycle in this area that we need to keep we got to keep our pulse on, especially when there's these financial milestones that happen in this area.
There are a few different ways that jurisdictions have tried to create and foster entrepreneurship in various regions as it pertains to venture capital and investment. One is the organic growth, which quite frankly is the most impactful. That's when somebody has an exit or comes into money and they feel it is in their best interest and the community's best interest to give back. So those are the individuals, like you said, with Reggie, with Cvent. The second level is almost spurred growth. So if you look at what happened in Las Vegas with the CEO of Zappos, Tony Hsieh, he had a fairly successful exit to Amazon, and he started an entire district and put in hundreds of millions of dollars, I believe, a significant amount of money, don't quote me on the amount, and actually brought people in to live, to work, to build, and they reinvigorated city blocks of that, and the success of that is to be determined. And the third way is an artificial government play, where governments then seed specific funds and encourage people to do stuff. In the level of success and commitment, there are cities that have had more growth, and quite frankly, there's opportunity out there for jurisdictions to take a larger play now, in that some cities are actually pricing themselves out of the market. So there's movement from San Francisco, from DC in some ways, the region, and from New York to secondary markets like Portland, arguably Seattle because of Amazon, and other cities we might want to look at is Denver, parts of Ohio, and also Austin. So there's a whole different, deeper conversation around that.
Just a couple of thoughts. I've heard some comments earlier today about a combination of either the county doesn't have certain things to provide, or historically we haven't done it this way. And second, I've heard a fair amount of comparison with places like Silicon Valley and such. I think I would encourage shifting the story arc a bit away from chasing in order to kind of be almost a Me Too, and say, what do we have that we can really stand down on hard in order to create the environment we want, whether or not it's identical or analogous to a Silicon Valley or Seattle. I've lived in both, and they're both very different. If anything, I would say one of the common attributes is that they don't seek to be like each other. And I think that the county has that asset essentially sitting just under the hood waiting to be exploited. Final thing I'll say is, I think from the standpoint of drawing folks in, sometimes it's not so much, in my experience with startups, creating a new shiny object. It's creating, as opposed to creating an environment where they have oxygen. They have oxygen to move, to unfold, to be, in a sense, sort of the free radical of ideas that they otherwise can't find a home to be. And that is certainly a very dominant characteristic of Silicon Valley, all over the peninsula, really, from San Francisco on down. It certainly has become a characteristic of Seattle in very meaningful ways. So, in a sense, removing some strictures or barriers that might accidentally be there by virtue of historical inertia may, in and of itself, be, it's never just one thing, but it may be a significant option to transition for the area.
Dan, did you have, and we'll let Dan have the last question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Thanks, John. What I understand, one of the fastest growing business types in the world is NGOs or nonprofits. And I think there's some opportunities to do some maybe nurturing, maybe incubation, innovation of that. Do you want to comment on that, or give us, give me any kind of sense of what you see or know of, or where we could go or look at to try to look at something like that?
Is that all right? I'll share my experience, particularly in Seattle. I worked with Techstars. This is about 4 years ago. They piloted. So Techstars is an incubator organization that began in Colorado and I think it's in Colorado, and has expanded throughout the nation. Certainly very successful. One of the things they began to try to do is essentially co-incubate with organizations, and one of their early ventures was with Microsoft. So they sat down with Microsoft, and Microsoft said, hey, we're interested in piloting some things that we don't think we have the incubator infrastructure to do single-handedly, but we have some technology that we think you guys would benefit from. So they essentially drafted a theme, and they took the Kinect technology, which is originally the gaming gesture technology, where you could stand back and make things happen on the screen just by gesturing in the air. So that's historically, we built that as a gaming technology, but we actually think it has productivity opportunities that aren't being exploited. So with Techstars, we formed this co-incubator, and it was housed in Microsoft's offices in South Lake Union, which was a brainchild of Paul Allen. And the curriculum that we designed was entirely around bringing teams worldwide in for 13 weeks who were specializing in using the Microsoft Kinect gesture technology, but for non-gaming reasons, anywhere from medical to body imaging to sizing, all kinds of different things. And so we brought in 11 teams in the space. Everybody was jammed into one space, but they had their own arenas for 13 weeks, and then it culminated in what's traditionally called Pitch Day with in front of angel investors. It was a fabulous example, and I think that the same, given Fairfax's density of corporate headquarters here, both NGO as well as Simply Private, I think there is tremendous opportunity to take that model and build upon it.
Well,
Oh, I wanted to follow up really quick on that.
please, no.
In DC, they actually there's 3 organizations I know, Impact Hub, which do social entrepreneurs, they provide a co-working space, Village Capital, which they put money into, B corporations, and then and finally Halcyon Incubator, which is run by Dr. Kuno, and really amazing. You should check it out if you want to get more. I can give you some more information on that. But they as what he said, they do sort of a demo style. They'll bring in a cohort, and then they actually do a demo day, and then that's where a lot of the social entrepreneur investors they show up in droves.
There's a very large ecosystem that's slightly quiet, though, in the DC region for investing in the impact economy. Practices at law firms are now standing up. Womble Carlyle is an example of that. They have an entire practice group that is dedicated to impact space investing, so it might be something to look at.
well, Adam, Derek, Kathy, Brian, Min, Marcy, thank you. That was awesome.